Please be seated. Ko hinga te tautara, e te waia nui e tānei. Hei rākau nui nei ti tātou nahiri. O tātou kura, mō nā whaia o ata whai. Welcome back to your Carmel home, Pauline, as a Mercy woman and as a Mercy leader. As a legacy of the Mercy Sisters' response to the call for wahine tapu to come to Aotearoa, as a continuation of the Mercy journey from Catherine Macaulay in Bagot Street, Dublin, to Pauline Ingle in Shakespeare Road, Milford. As a historian, I am sure Pauline would be delighted to realise that one of her former sixth form history students is able to make historical connections between Pauline's life and the beginnings of the Mercy story. Like Catherine, Pauline suffered adversity in her early life. Both women came to religious life in their later years. Both were well educated. Pauline had an MA with honours. Pauline, like Catherine, connected with vast networks of people, like we have here today, from the disobedient schoolgirl to the influential movers and shakers of society, and she could tell you stories about all of them. Pauline and Catherine were relentless in their focus on the education of women. Both mentored other younger women, and I count myself as one of Pauline's many mentees. Who cannot forget Girls Can Do Anything sticker above the door to the door to her office in the foyer. Whenever you visited Pauline, you could always be assured of the good-humoured way, with lots of laughter, that she cajoled you and others to do what she saw needed to be done. Catherine too used gentle humour to engage and sustain others in their work. What I always admired about Pauline, again like Catherine, was her fierce opposition to any forms of injustice, especially systemic injustice. And for anyone who has been on the receiving end of one of her passionate missives, her emotive use of language to highlight her concerns and right the wrongs, as she saw them, were very effective in getting things done, getting attention and raising awareness. She got things done and put things right, and made a lot of noise if they weren't. Pauline understood that it's easy to do just mercy, but challenging injustice, threatening the status quo, now that was where she excelled. The final part of our college mission statement, describing our Carmel graduates as ready to challenge and shape the future, is there because that's what I learned from Pauline. Kia koe, whaia Pauline, moi mai rā, moi mai rā, moi mai rā.
Yeah. E te atua atawhai he hapu tō nui. Ki te o hurihuri me papatonu ku, he hapu tapu tō nui. Nā awa, nā monga, nā marae e hora nei, tēnā koutou. Nā hunga kiua, turatia mō mai, e tariki. Kia tātou te kanohi ora, kia ora mai anō. E te whare tēnei, whare hātumaria o te maunga Carmel, tēnā koe. E nā mate, moi mai koutou I o Mongaroa, haere, haere, haere. And tēnā koru wā to Tina and to Rangi. I endorse and thank you for your welcome. Tēnā koe Chris. I thank you for this very warm welcome to Carmel College. Pauline is home, as Carmel is her tūranga waiwai, the place where she has stood like a mighty tautara, perhaps not in stature, but with an indomitable spirit of mercy and justice, enriching the lives of so many, some of whom are here this evening. And kia ora pā, welcome, and kia ora Bernard. Pauline lived and breathed the Carmel community and was known to say very firmly, and only those who know Pauline well know how firmly she can sound and say and speak, I will leave Carmel over my dead body. And she said that many, 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 many times to leadership. And so it was, Pauline, that you lived on this site until a few short months ago when you took the grand journey across the road to Lady Ellen. I looked up on the website for Carmel and I looked at the motto for Carmel, act justly, love tenderly, and walk humbly with your God, quotes Mika. It epitomises the practice of mercy Pauline lived, mercy as a call to action, and the choice to be merciful expressed through peace and justice. More justice than peace, I would say. Mercy goes hand in hand with self-dignity, respect for the dignity of others, and a willingness to promote just social structures which celebrate the dignity of all. Love is the strength to persevere, and Pauline was one of God's battlers in the service of life. Tonight we gather to remember our very special Dame Pauline. The stories we share from families and Sisters of Mercy, from friends, colleagues and old girls. It's one of the few colleges I know that still call people old girls, but I think Pauline would have liked that. It was kind of grounded, wasn't it? Full of grunt, the old girls, because, she would have loved that. She used to call everyone, an old girl or a doll. Here doll, come doll. Will be but a glimpse into the largesse of Pauline's life, lived with such tenacity and vivacity until the final hours. And those of us who were with Pauline in the final hours, it was a privilege to be with the beauty of the moment. And thank you. And I want to say a special welcome to the family, but especially to Matt. Matt, Pauline's nephew, was there the whole way with us at the hospital, and it was just a beautiful moment of grace, and I thank you for that. Pauline had the quality of being real, very real to us and real in every sense of the word. Her words expressed the colour in living a passionate and engaged life. She used to quote often from the Velveteen Rabbit, and so I read you this. She loved one of her favourite pieces, and I read this to you now as a memory as we sit and remember, to remember the real, and the real in each of us that actually Pauline had the grace to see. She got behind you and pushed a stick often, but it was for you to become who you truly are. And even some who were most maybe she might have been problematic named by other people, were treasures for her, because boy, she was going to make you do it and get there and go forward. I taught here many, many years ago in the intermediate, and the greatest fear in those days was to have someone in the front corridor. You'd have to come and put your desk in the front corridor outside the hall. And I think, you wouldn't want a word from Pauline as she walked past. There was enough shame in that to make you want to be better very quickly. But real isn't how you are made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up? He asked, or bit by bit. It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. All of us gathered here this evening have experienced a little of this being real from Pauline, and are richer for the encounters and the relationships. Tonight we give thanks to you, Pauline. Me whakatoa wairua, kia kite a iwi katoa, ma te atua koe e manaki. May you be held always in mercy. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā katoa katoa.
E nā mana, e nā reo, raurangatira mai. Tō te kanohi, tōna kite. Tō te hine ngaro, tōna kite. Tō te wairua, tōna kite. Tō te atawhai, tōna kite. In the name of the mana and the chiefly ones who've gone before, and particularly you, Pauline, I greet you tonight, face to face, mind to mind, spirit to spirit. On Tuesday afternoon, I was with Pauline and Helen Newfield in Pauline's room at Lady Alum. Helen has been in the practice of reading to Pauline from the London tablet every Tuesday. And how Helen usually starts is to read out the list of contents so that Pauline can choose what she wants to hear. On Tuesday, Pauline opted eagerly for a column by Melanie McDonough. Some people in Melanie's parish had criticised those who make a habit of attending funerals, suggesting they only went for the food afterwards. Melanie took them to task, pointing out that whatever the reason, everyone likes to think that there will be more than a few people to pray for them and remember them. Pauline agreed wholeheartedly with those sentiments. So in that sense, she adds her welcome to that of Chris and Katrina. And I have no doubt she is very glad to see us all here tonight. The piece in the tablet was entitled, "Everyone is Welcome at My Funeral." We're going to begin with a reading from Isaiah, which starts with the words, "on this mountain." And our context tonight is Mount Carmel, so we can apply it here and now. We'll then pray together the first glorious mystery of the Rosary, the Resurrection. And I'd suggest that perhaps the sisters could lead us in that, and the rest of us will respond. In preparing for this evening, so many stories have been told about Pauline, and I'm sure there are many more. For someone who was not expected to survive her childhood, she has packed a lot of living into her 87 years. After the Rosary, a few groups of people have offered to share their memories of Pauline in the different aspects of her life. It was such a full and varied life that we cannot hope to cover all of its aspects, and there will be a time at the end of those speakers when others in the hall can come up briefly and tell their stories. And of course, we can continue sharing memories over a cup of tea afterwards. Not sure about the food. Colleen, I'd like you to come and read from Isaiah.
A reading from the prophet Isaiah. On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats and the finest of wines. On this mountain, he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. The word of the Lord.
The first of the glorious mysteries, the Resurrection.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end. Amen. Eternal rest grant to her, O Lord. Grant to her, O Lord, and let the perpetual light shine upon her. May she rest in peace. May she rest in peace.
Family stories were really important to Pauline, as Helen and I discovered when we were recording her memoirs. She began by telling us how, when her mother was buried alongside her father in the Karori Lawn Cemetery, space for a potential third grave was noticed in the plot. This puzzled them until her sister Marie exclaimed, "Of course, that would have been for you." Pauline rejoiced that it had not been needed yet. And her family is very glad of that too. I now invite Peter and John to come forward.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't prepared any particular memories because most of them may come up in my sister's speech tomorrow with the eulogy she's doing, and she'll probably correct most of my memories anyway, so I won't worry about that. The main thing I would like to just say is the part that Pauline played within the Engel family, and for me, she was the touchstone. If you wanted to connect with the family, you went to Pauline. And I heard about cousins, children I hadn't met, and I knew what was going on all over the place. As family, we were always fairly proud of Pauline. We probably embellished her reputation a little bit too much to people we met. And when I was going out with a young lady in Christchurch, Pauline was coming down and invited me to go to lunch with that young lady. And she wasn't having a bar of that. She took a sister along as well for a bit of company as well. Things turned out all right. She's still with me, that young lady, and Pauline, she's got to know her very well, and she's part of our family. So that's really the main point that I wanted to make, that I don't quite know who will fill that gap in the family now, but it was very important to us, and it's just one of those things that now that someone else will have to step up and take that job. Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name's Peter Engel. I'm the son of Pauline's brother. And thanks very much for the opportunity to share a few memories, because Pauline was very special to us, one of the sort of special people in your life. Seems to me most of those special people have had disproportionately large personalities for their body size, but and I'm sure Jane and my family was no more special to her than all the other nieces and nephews, but she made us feel like we were, and we were happy to live under that illusion. But my early memories were something about a dog kennel somewhere that we were playing in. I'm not sure where it was. Jane just corrected me because she would remember that. I thought it was down here by the lake, but apparently not. The next memories really were some teenage discussions we were having with Pauline, which got more and more robust, and One of my siblings, who's not as discreet as I am, used some colourful language, which I'm not saying I haven't used it, but I haven't used it in front of a nun. And it always stuck in my mind how sort of relaxed and unjudgmental Pauline was about that, and I guess that's what being a teacher does to you. But a lot of our memories were after we started having children, were the visits, the phone calls, the family get-togethers that we had. We had a lot of phone calls because I spent a bit of time on the road, and I know if I'm going to talk to Pauline that having 10 minutes is not going to cut it. So I'd ring her on the road, but I still get a bit worried about what's this going to look like on my company account, this call, it's not finishing. But it reminds me a bit of a saying I saw the other day about when you fight a gorilla, you don't finish when you're tired, it's when the gorilla's tired. So our phone calls were a bit like that. They could be short because a more important visitor came in the door. Well, they could be long because you had a lot of time. And like John, sometimes I was hearing about how proud I would be of my cousin's child. I haven't seen the cousin for 20 years. The chance of seeing this child I'm proud of is even less. But she cared about all of them. We talked about politics, we talked about education, we talked about the whole whānau and the family, and they were very important to us. We didn't talk about Pauline because that's not what she was about. But interestingly, we never talked about religion. She either decided early it was a waste of time with me, or she figured that if I didn't know what her views were, that words weren't going to help me anyway. But I can never recall talking about religion. I can't say the same for her mother, but certainly with Pauline. We didn't agree on anything, but we seemed to be able to comfortably disagree. And she broadened my thinking quite a bit around parenting and social conscious issues. She certainly coloured my thinking. But other things we agreed to disagree on and just keep going. Like John mentioned, she really took me more into my roots and ancestors than anyone else has. And I think that sort of helped me understand my father, my grandfather, those people. Learned a lot of things. Jane and I had a very special time with Pauline, about half a day, sitting on her bed about 3 months ago. And you'd think after knowing her for 40 years I'd know everything, but I didn't know half of what she told me that day. And so that's probably quite a special thing that we were able to do that while she was still with us, and as you know, she was sharp as a tack right to the end. So my real thought and memories of Pauline was that she cared about the most important things in life, and they were about people really. So whenever we got together as a group, I think Pauline would catch up with everyone in the room and the questions would all be about them and their families. She cared enough to send us photos that my father had given her when we were little. She cared a lot about the school, and she took Jane and I around the school recently and was very, very proud of it. So I think in all we were very fortunate to be part of her whānau and part of that group of people that she cared so much about. Thank you.
This afternoon when I arrived in my high heels, I realised that I had to go and collect some water from the lake to bless Pauline's coffin with, and I just wondered how I was going to do that down on the creaky old jetty. Fortunately, the Engel family were having a picnic down by the lake, so thank you for the water, for the blessing. I think it was Peter who went and got that. As a teenager, Paula, and despite being plagued with health problems, which meant she could hardly walk up the road from school each day, from the train station, Pauline became very involved with the Catholic youth movement, the CYM. It was based on scripture readings and a process known as See, Judge, Act. And from that process and from her family background, developed Pauline's passion for social justice. You may not be able to read the inscription on her cap on the photo inside the leaflet. It says, Muldoon must go. So it's no surprise that when Pauline decided to try out her growing call to the religious life, it was to the walking nuns of Catherine Macaulay that she turned. She entered the Mercy Convent in Auckland in April 1960. Mary's going to tell us a bit more about that.
E te rangatira Dame Pauline Francis Engel, tēnā koe. E te whānau o Pauline, tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I endorse the welcomes already offered this evening, and as Sister of Mercy and friend, extend warm greetings of welcome to you, Pauline, our sister, our friend, and our very own Dame as you return to your beloved Carmel College. We have already welcomed you, Pauline's nieces, nephews, great nieces. Are there great and grand nieces here tonight? Yes, and offering you our sympathy at this time of loss of our beloved Pauline. And welcome to each of you, our colleagues, friends and past pupils. Old girls, is that correct? I thought you were past pupils as we gather tonight to honour Pauline. As Kath said, I'm Mary Foy, I'm friend and Sister of Mercy, and standing here with me are Agnes Brown and Beverly Parkinson, friends and novitiate companions. We have journeyed our mercy life together with Pauline for over 56 years. Bev is the person who has lived here in community with Pauline and their four-legged friend Lulu over recent years. And Agnes's family, the Brown family, and Pauline's family were friends for many years before these two women came together again in the novitiate in the 1960s. My connection with the McDavitt family began with Mother Christine, our novice mistress and Pauline's aunt, who taught me in Standard 1 at St Joseph's in Te Aroha in 1950. So life's connections are truly intertwined. We were among those privileged to be with Pauline in the final hours of her life on Tuesday night and the first moments of her death on Wednesday morning. We rejoice that she no longer suffers, that she is now bathed in the light of God's love, seeing clearly once again, and reunited with so many whom she so greatly loves. As already mentioned, Pauline was a passionate woman, and among her great passions were people, her family, and the Carmel College community. Pauline deeply loved her God, and in her illness of these past years, she spoke of her appreciation of her times for prayer, no doubt telling God in no uncertain terms just how things were and how they could be. As a Sister of Mercy, Pauline was mission-focused, determined to support young women to grow to their full potential, always working for justice in every situation, committed to education on many levels. Pauline's commitment to education and her creativity enabled several students from Hato Maria in Pawaranga, a tiny country school, to gain Catholic secondary education, for which they are eternally grateful. As a teacher herself, Pauline was engaging and encouraging. Her goal for each student was to achieve their very best, and her determination to ensure this happened was well known among her students. And as mentioned elsewhere and mentioned by Monica Costello to us recently, here at Carmel in particular, Pauline was known as a mover and a shaker. I am almost always amazed at Pauline's deep interest and connection with so many people. Her genuine engagement gave each of us an understanding that each of us is important to her. During her months at Lady Ellen Home, Pauline received many unexpected visitors and greatly enjoyed reconnecting, especially with those who popped in, announced or unannounced. As friend, Pauline's love was genuine and faithful, and expressed through her oft-expressed gratitude for the simplest actions. Gratitude is one of the qualities I've always appreciated in Pauline. Courage in the face of life's difficulty is another that stands out for me. She so often faced the obstacle front on and found her way forward, courageously continuing on. Coping with her loss of sight is an obvious example. And when she became too frail to continue living in community at Carmel with Bev and the aforementioned four-legged friend, Pauline was determined to remain in her own North Shore community. In this, Pauline was supported and enabled by our congregational leadership, with Katrina Fabish leading the process, which eventuated in Pauline spending the final months of her life at Lady Ellen Home. There she received the health support she needed from professional staff, with members of the community and Sisters of Mercy offering her comfort and support. Pauline was overwhelmingly grateful for this opportunity and care. Many people say of Pauline, she calls a spade, and describe her as feisty. We knew in no uncertain terms where she stood on issues and in given situations. This was not always a comfortable place to be, but Pauline put it all out there, and then she got on with living. We learned to do the same. When I first met Pauline, it was when I entered the novitiate. And very often in her conversation, and often when she was a bit frustrated with life, she'd say, after 18 years in the public service, and at 18 myself, I was amazed and used to think how old she was. And Pauline became a mentor in those days. I was barely settled in my new novitiate life when Mother Christine gave me documentation for beginning to study for Teacher's Certificate. I was advised to take English literature, so Pauline, the avid reader, selected my reading list, which Mother immediately altered to what she considered more suitable reading material for a postulant. So I worked my way through Lord Jim. As mentioned else by others, Pauline was a political being and she was a proud Labour supporter throughout her life. In recent times, we enjoyed what we entitled our political conversations, with our kōrero ranging over many eras and situations. And I have to say, we both thoroughly enjoyed those times together. Many people know Pauline as principal of Carmel College. Pauline held many leadership roles in her life and ministry as a Sister of Mercy. She was a member of the leadership team in the 1990s. She was trustee of our Auckland Sisters of Mercy Trust, and she was director of our ministry companies over many years. She held the significant role of Vicar for Education within the Auckland Catholic Diocese in her final years of active ministry as a Sister of Mercy. Pauline, you have influenced us greatly in life. We thank you today. Moi mai rā, Pauline. Let us conclude this reflection singing the chorus of the Circle of Mercy, of which Pauline was a significant part during her life among us and will continue to be in her new life now and into the future.
For the circle of mercy is timeless. It is spirit of life itself, which rounds us in faith and lifts us in hope and holds us in God's loving care and holds us in God's loving care.
Thank you very much.
When Pauline came here in 1965 as a teacher, she was teaching all subjects, but especially religious education and school certificate English and history. She, unbelievably, saw herself, and these are her words, as an inadequate amateur when it came to teaching, having had no teacher training but a couple of years apprenticeship at St Mary's. She was studying 2 papers extramurally from Massey and finding these difficult at the same time as a full day in the classroom because it was 16 years since she had left school. Remember, this was pre-integration, so the sisters were also raising funds to pay staff and buy resources, cleaning the school, and liable to be called at all hours because they were living on the site. With all that was going on in her life, Pauline said she felt sorry for the students who were afflicted with her. Kath Murphy, Cara Brockles and Hera Dunleavy may give us another perspective.
Although the memories I share with you tonight are of 50 years ago, I can clearly see the classroom we were sitting in, and I can still hear the rush of something forceful approaching. We were a 5th form history class, absorbed in chatter, when, as described by Kristen Price, née Bortwood, a little pocket rocket threw open the door, banged her fist on the desk, and demanded quiet. This was our introduction to the newest member of the Carmel College staff, Sister Pauline, short, vibrant, and so different from anything we'd experienced before. She exuded an energy which affected and impacted, drew us in and engaged us. From that first day till our school years were completed, we looked forward to our history and geography lessons because Pauline was well prepared, intelligent, and passionate about the topics she taught. Her teaching style was so refreshingly different. She was positive and enthusiastic. The Earth's landscapes, peoples, places and environments, world leaders and historical battles were no longer dull facts on textbook pages, but became meaningful and relevant in our young lives. Alison Smith née Jalfon added, she was a great believer in actions speaking louder than words. She listened and truly cared about us and was the first to give praise, and she meant it. She encouraged and challenged, and for that we are eternally grateful, as we are for her enthusiasm, for her generosity, and for her joy and love of life, which has helped make us who we are today. We all remember how we were encouraged to discuss and debate. Our opinions, comments, and answers to questions were valued and respected. To be able to express and hear opposing opinions and views gave substance and purpose to our learning. As Kristen stated, this was liberating. We were being encouraged then, way back in 1965, to become critical thinkers. It was Pauline's personal approach and her natural responses which we just loved. We remember the times when she would enter a classroom in a thunderous mood, slam her books down with the caution, "Don't take any notes from me today, girls, I'm in a foul mood," and adding that she would love to share the reasons for her mood, but it just wouldn't be wise. We loved the fact that a teacher could be open and honest with her feelings, about her feelings, and share them with us, her students. Pauline also had a great sense of humour, which again changed the way we could relate to a teacher. But her manner always commanded respect, which we understood and appreciated. Claire Bailey, née Harris, talked about Pauline's refreshing humanity. She wasn't bound by rigidity. Even when thunder lurked in her, admonishing you, there would always be a laugh at the corners of her mouth, and you knew she understood why you did what you did. Elizabeth Auger, née Mulcahy, described Pauline as a woman of deep faith and strong convictions, who could speak frankly and fairly with people. Liz stated, "One thing I found when she talked to me was that I always felt quite comfortable. She spoke to you as an equal." Because of the era during which we were taught, the sisters didn't ever share with their students their own life stories. But Sister Pauline had little time for convention and rules. She had a way of stopping in the middle of some great historic event to magically entwine a story about her own life. Pauline had worked in the Lands and Survey Department for 10 years before entering the convent, so she shared stories of those days. We sat enthralled during one lesson as she told us of her struggle to give up smoking. So when she entered the convent, along with her rosary beads and crucifix, she packed a supply of cigarettes. She told us that in her early days of training, she would head off into the large wooded novitiate grounds for a ciggy and a prayer. We thought this was just fantastic, A nun had told us a personal story and about smoking. During the 60s, the American influence had started to enter our homes through television. The Sloppy Joe, a must-have trend, made a huge appearance on one particular Mufti Day. 2 significant memories were created that day from a very simple statement. Sister Pauline saw 2 of us approaching in our matching on-trend outfits. Kath and Chris, I love your Sloppy Joes. She knew that the oversized, mandatory charcoal grey brushed jersey called a Sloppy Joe, and she had shortened our names, unheard of in those days. So often we got the full title, Kathleen Murphy, Christine Burns. Pauline, you came into our lives 52 years ago as a dynamic, inspirational and much-loved teacher. You followed our adult lives with genuine interest. You supported us in our times of illness and bereavement. Our much-loved friend, mentor, confidant. It has been a privilege and a joy to have known you. You have enriched our lives and will always be a very special part of our life stories. Rest in peace, dear Pauline.
He mihi nui ki a koe whaia, he mihi nui te aroha ki te whānau ki a tātou katoa. I stand here as one of 5 Dunleavy sisters that came through Carmel College. I was very privileged to have an audience with Sister Pauline in her first year as principal at the tender age of 12, when I was summoned to her office to have a lively debate on the finer points of social justice, which we found we both had a love of. I thought I could exact revenge on some senior girls who found it necessary to shut some of the younger intermediates in an old freezer which was kept for basketballs and sit on just enough time for the girls to be scared out of their wits. So Sister Pauline and I discussed this at length, and I found that she encouraged my passion for justice. She expanded the scope of my sheer will by first forcing it into submission. Needless to say, from that day on, we loved being in each other's company. We had regular talks, and for 30 years or so, I have had coffee with Sister Pauline on the odd occasion, and we've had lively talks about life and art. She used to come and see some of the plays I was in with Auckland Theatre Company, and we always discussed a passion of ours, Mother Mary O'Bear, and talked about how I would one day write the play and she, of course, would play the starring role. So it's unfortunate this did not come about, but I was looking through some of my notes and I found this description of Mother Mary, and I thought, wow, I have to read this out. The surging emotional dynamism in our midst made us all more or less oblivious of an eye defect that burned with a fiery light in a face almost round, with a kind and forgiving smile. Above all, there flowed from a heart much bigger than her frame a warmth that won our lasting love and affection. My sister Trish, Professor Trish Dunleavy, Senior Lecturer in Media Studies at Victoria University, she couldn't be here tonight, but she really wanted me to read this out. I was one of Sister Pauline's students at Carmel in the early 1970s. What a brilliant teacher she was, one of the best actually, thus inspiring several of us to teach ourselves. As she got to know us and we became senior students, Pauline would sometimes be tempted into telling us stories of what it was like to be a young nun, about things she had got up to before we knew her, and some hilarious, amazingly forthright tales were told. We listened absolutely enthralled. What a brilliant educational leadership career Pauline went on to have. Her gifts with relating to and enthusing people, ensuring her uncommon influence, popularity and achievement. You are missed, Pauline. Thank you for your passion, mentoring and ongoing friendship. Tricia Dunleavy, Carmel College student, 1972 to 1975. Well done.
Ngā mihi arahanui kia koe whae Pauline. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm not as prepared as I would have liked to have been for this occasion. I got the call up from an old friend to say that she wasn't able to speak on behalf of those students who knew Sister Pauline as a principal while I was making my food box dinner at about 5:30 this evening. Nevertheless, I was a little bit used to it because Bianca, who couldn't be here tonight, was known as one of the naughty girls. And very often I would be picking up the slack in some way or other, which both of us had a good giggle over. My mother Kathleen was taught by Sister Pauline, and it is a huge honour to be speaking on behalf of our family this evening. I arrived as a fresh-faced first former in 1986, back in the days of the primrose blouse, the terrible cotton tartan skirt and the matching brown jumpers with our names embroidered in primrose cotton, much to the mirth of the Westlake girls. The first introduction I had to Sister Pauline was when my mother introduced her as her daughter, and I was amazed that Sister Pauline remembered more than just my mother as a past pupil. She remembered that my mother had a brother. She remembered her parents, and this is a constant theme I'm hearing from people that once she knew your family, she really knew your family, and she was really interested. And I immediately felt like part of the Carmel whānau, as did all students who came in, because she knew all of our names, regardless of whether you'd had parents who'd been in a parish she was associated with. She knew everybody, and she treated you all with the same sense of, what's the word for it? Yeah, she really wanted you all to feel like you belonged in Awhi. She knew me better because I could sing, and I was happy to sing. And so she would often let me know what she would like me to sing for different assemblies and different times at school. And sometimes when you've got a special gift and talent, it's something that sort of is, it can be as a gift and a burden. But she treated my talent as if it was a skill, and it was my duty to use that skill in the best way that it could be used. So there was no sort of, I never felt like she was lauding me or the other girls that could do other things. It was just, right, you can do it, and this is what you will do, and this is how it will be done. And so when we come in for assemblies, again, like Kath said, there would be this dynamic thunder of heels that came from the back of the hall all the way to the front. And when we would hear them coming, we would stand, which was new, and for a first former, and up she would come to the podium. And she had an expectation that we would behave in a particular way. And if it sometimes that demanded a very forceful presence on the stage. Other times, all it would take was a look, and you knew exactly where you were at with her. The first time I came into close contact with Sister Pauline was after an incident at the fourth form camp. When I tell this story to my students, as I'm a teacher now, I say I made a good choice and a bad choice. The bad choice was that I'd chosen to take a packet of cigarettes concealed inside a sock in my shoe to the fourth form camp at Shakespeare Bay. The good choice I made was not to smoke them. However, 2 other students thought it prudent to smoke their cigarettes behind my tent. And when the neighbouring campus complained that girls were smoking cigarettes and our tent was searched, it was me that got sent home. So a girlfriend and I, lonely fourth formers, arrived back at Carmel, and we were taken home first and expected to be at school the next day. This was by far and away the worst trouble I had ever been remotely involved in. And so I remember sitting outside Sister Pauline's office the next morning. The door opened and she saw us one at a time. And all I had was the head to one side and the nod and the smile, and I couldn't really read where things were going. But in I came. And we had a long and lengthy conversation about the marvellousness but the terrible trickiness of cigarette smoking. She shared with me how much she loved it and how sad it was that she had to stop. But she was very, very firm with me that cigarette smoking was no habit for a singer. And she went on to say that although I fancied myself as a Janis Joplin, it would take many, many cigarettes before I'd get rid of the Julie Andrews. It was in the next year that I was part of a fifth form class that we were able to do 6 subjects rather than the usual 5. And because of the difficult timetabling, for the first time in a long time, Sister Pauline was given the opportunity to teach religious education to my fifth form class. It was nothing short of amazing. There wasn't much space. It's a little bit like schools these days. You sort of get trucked about, and we had to have the RE lessons in the music room. And sometimes she'd be called away because she had an important job and there were always things to do as principal. But the lessons that she was there were vibrant and had an extraordinarily strong social justice theme. We were encouraged, like Kath said, to debate. She accepted our opinions, but really encouraged us to develop them with intellect and heart, and of course the idea of social justice as a massive theme in those lessons. We'd already seen it firsthand. Toward the end of our fourth form year, there were some fourth form girls who had gone a little bit sideways on a skit that they were performing, which was supposed to have an environmental pick-up litter theme. As a teacher now, I can only imagine what the teacher who had okayed or had not really seen what was going to happen had allowed it to go onto the stage. It morphed into something quite awful. What had happened was that the theme was something to do with collecting trash from the street. And they had turned it into something whereby people were coming to get women who were street workers, and taking them off. I remember the assembly sort of being vaguely amused, but a little bit kind of confused at how this comedic routine had come to this place. But we really knew it wasn't a good place when we heard the heels. So she had been sitting at the front, and those who know me will know that I don't often let the facts get in the way of a good story. But 30 years later, I still really remember this sequence. I remember hearing the heels and everyone being confused as whether they were supposed to stand up at this point or sit down. I remember the heels, and I remember an order that the girls were to meet her in my office and the heels went down. We all stood up and knew something terrible had happened. We heard the office door slam, and in those days, about on the white wall there was a picture of the Pope. That kind of went a bit skew, and with the force of the slamming of the door, the fire alarms. And we all stood there in stunned silence. It was at that point we knew that there was no room for Sister Pauline to accept any kind of tacit bigotry, or I had the correct word down here but I can't find it. I think you know what I mean. If she saw any kind of injustice or anything that casual discrimination, any kind of casual discrimination, it wasn't going to be on her watch. And we knew that. The girls with brains were respected, but were expected to use them. The girls who really pushed the boundaries were delighted in for their forcefulness and their kind of zhuzh. I had a friend, Karen Sedawall, who spent a lot of time with Sister Pauline and said she never felt judged. She said, I always felt like I could go into her office and speak freely like we were old friends. And I think that's how a lot of us feel. I just want to finish with He kōtuku te rerenga tahi. Your unusual capacity for people is something I'm not sure I will see again. So in that sense, in her passing, we've seen the white heron fly.
Moi mai e kui, tākoto mai rā i te aroha o tō tātou āriki.
The years that she lived at Mount Carmel Convent, Pauline was a friend and neighbour to the Thomas family next door. Mary and her children were part of Pauline's everyday life and continued to be friends long after the girls had finished their school careers. Bev and Alma also relied on the third generation of Thomas children who came and went through the convent doors. It was a very sad day for Pauline when those houses next door were sold last year, but she was watching eagerly from a distance to see what would happen next. Robin will share a few memories. Robin and Hemi.
Oh, as tall as you. Kia ora. It's a great honour to have the opportunity to talk tonight as a neighbour. The obvious choice to speak from the Thomas family about Sister Pauline is Frances. So here is her message. I arrived back in Jordan on Tuesday after a visit home to New Zealand, and the next day received the sad news of Sister Pauline's death. Although I can't be there today, I am in spirit as we express our thanks that Sister Pauline was part of all our lives. The Thomas family knew Sister Pauline not only as our teacher many years ago, but as neighbour and good friend. For over 50 years, our family and the sisters of Mount Carmel Convent lived next door to each other. Borrowed eggs, cups of sugar, popped over for a chat, provided help when called on, and generally kept a lookout for each other. During these decades, Sister Pauline was neighbour and friend to 4 generations of Thomases. She always delighted to know our children as they were born and grew up. And more recently, for some of us, our grandchildren, who also live next door. She was godmother to my second daughter, and she sincerely loved us all. As past pupils of the school, we all know what a great memory Sister Pauline had. She remembered all her Carmel students, and she welcomed our visits and letters and phone calls. She was happy for us in our joys and concerned for us in our hardships, as well as listening to our news, delighting or commiserating as appropriate. She loved to share the good news of others. She was interested in what happened to us, the marriages, the births of children, new jobs, illnesses, lost jobs, death, our children's education and work and marriages, all the happy and sad occurrences that make up life. She would also love to hear what we were working on, what our ideas and opinions were, and she always encouraged us to develop our strengths. In recent decades, I saw more of Sister Pauline and we became good friends. She had developed macular degeneration of the eye, and loving films as she did, we would go together to a movie while she could still see something on the screen. Then we would have afternoon tea and discuss and dissect the film. This became a regular routine until, with Sister's failing eyesight and our increasing difficulty in finding a good film, it ended. But we continued the visits and outings. Books and films, music and theatre, thoughtful articles, challenging conversation, a good argument about world issues and American politics, and learning new things. After her family, her friends, her students, and her work, these were the things that Sister Pauline most loved. It was conversation and argument that I came to enjoy most in our friendship. Although we agreed on much, we also disagreed on many things and loved to argue about them. Sister was more liberal and I was more conservative. She listened to the news on TV and radio, while I instead read, watched and listened to primary sources available online. So we brought different information to our discussion. I always admired Sister Pauline's wonderful ability to listen to a contrary idea and not dismiss it before considering the merit, probability and the evidence for it. Of course, she could do this with lightning speed, so it was best to present only those ideas with sufficient evidence to support them. I visited Sister a few times while I was in New Zealand recently. I had not seen her since I'd left over a year ago. She was frailer in body, but her mind was as sharp as ever. We talked about life in Jordan, about her health over the past year, and about the unlikelihood of Darwinian evolution. For that one, I made sure I had evidence. Thank you, Sister Pauline, for being our neighbour and friend, and for your love and encouragement throughout our lives, and for the gift of friendship. We will miss you. We pray for you. May you rest in peace. Right, and the priest at Francis's Fra's local church in Amman, Jordan, will be offering a mass for Sister Pauline this week. Now, to finish off, someone from the next generation can just relate 5 seconds worth, because like our family, I have to shoot off to the airport to get a couple away, so it's going to be quick.
Yes. I don't think I need this, but it's here. The box that I'm standing on, I mean. I really got to know Sister Pauline when I was about 15 years old and I got my learner's driver's licence. And I had the licence and Sister Pauline didn't quite have the eyesight anymore, so between us, a driver we made. I'd take her to do some errands, usually just down to Milford, and she was amazingly relaxed for having a brand new driver driving her around when she may not have been as aware of her surroundings as she could have been. And as said before, she was happy when people turned up unannounced, which I'm grateful for, because I was the perennially uninvited and unannounced visitor. I'd just pop over from next door. And as I got my restricted licence and I could drive by myself, I would pop over and knock on her bedroom window if I saw the light was on, and she'd drop the keys out the window to me. But she had a real interest in others, and others who she may never have met, but may have just heard through stories that I'd told her about our family. And she remembered their names more often than some of their mothers may have. She was always erudite and frank, and a confidence that was born of a towering intelligence, and that's something to which I still aspire, and I feel really lucky that I got to grow up next to her and I got to know her as I did. We'd talk about politics on our drives, and that as a 15-year-old it was a good introduction to it, and I think that's was a formative part of my real passion for politics at the moment. As Mum's saying, we need to go, so rest in peace, sister, and we know you're up there watching us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
From the time she became a principal, Pauline was accustomed to working with boards of governors, of trustees, later of Zealandia, diocesan administration, and Tiaki Manatu. Never particularly orthodox, accustomed to doing things her own way, which may not have been the way things had always been done, or the prescribed way of doing them, Pauline's integrity and dynamism won her collaborators who became friends. One of these is Paul Callaghan.
Well, like all of those who come towards the end of the program, I have found those who have preceded me a very hard act to follow. However, as I say, we're getting to the bottom end of the program, I think, are we not, Kath? One more. Kath told me yesterday that Sister Pauline had recently been reading poems about nuns. And I found that as a coincidence, because when Helen phoned me to tell me that Pauline had died during the night, and you all know that the feelings that come to you when you are told of a good friend who dies. Throughout mine, however, was this insistent recurrence of the words of a poem that I had once again been reading a few nights earlier, the poem of the nuns, and more particularly their leader, who were lost when the Deutschland went down. And there the poet speaks of Jesu, the maid's son, who had that night, and I quote, "The glory of this nun, the glory of this nun." And the associations were, I guess, death in the night, death of a nun, her glory, followed by her coming into the incomparable radiance of the face of Jesu himself. Because Pauline herself was a valiant woman, not only in the sense of the poem, but also in the old biblical sense. Who shall find a valiant woman? You know, if there are tables in heaven, tables in the high hall of heaven, I am sure she will be seated at in grace, and enliven the one that Michael sits at the head of. You know, Michael of the morning, Michael of the army of the Lord. Because, as I say, in that army of the Lord, Pauline was one of the more valiant of the women. Now, my status in speaking to you tonight is based upon my being on the board of Carmel when Pauline was principal of Carmel. But I was privileged as well to have been on the board and on those years when all first four principals were conducting Carmel. There was Mary Justine and Monica, Pauline herself, and Colleen. And I shouldn't forget Anne Murray, who was for a short time acting principal. But I have to leave you, Kath, because for some reason, I don't know whether it was because I was too old or you were too young, but you came after my time. But I watched all of these great women, helped by the board, when the board could help them, as they wrestled with the problems of integrating Carmel into the state school system, at all times preserving its special character, the Mercy charism, and each building upon the achievement of her predecessor and inexorably bringing Carmel towards the great school it became. And while this is in memory of Pauline, I don't think that she would wish me to separate her from the continuum that was that process. Kath said to me, "Paul, you may be able to find words to do that." I guess boys can do everything. But I didn't, because the words individually, the words collectively, were hopelessly inadequate. I could have spoken, for example, Pauline's wide personal and professional repute and experience, her formidable intelligence, her practicality and her common sense, her energy and her enthusiasm, her mischievous wit, and her love for Carmel and its pupils and its wider community. But above all, her great faith and her devotion. However, how can I put this? I don't think, in terms of our recent readings, there were any talents about Pauline that were buried. But I still think that to describe her best are those three simple, descriptive, objective words, Dame, Sister Pauline, because they somehow encapsulate the idea of how she remarkably combined both her professional, her secular, and her religious vocations. Now, Pauline, in you I have lost a revered and much admired friend, but above all a very dear friend. But somebody said, with some mischief that might have been your own, that I should speak on behalf of everybody, and I should speak for old time's sake, and as such I should give you perhaps a few words of Latin. So I shall. Denique, Paulina, nos ipsos, nos ingeminus gentes, nos lacrimantes, nos lugentes, nos te salutamus. Atque in perpetuum soror, awe atque vale. Dear, dear sister, forever hail and farewell. A lot of notes, not mine, that are here.
Despite her small stature, Pauline would be referred to by her successors as one of the giants on whose shoulders we stood. She forged strong relationships with other North Shore and Auckland principals who admired her ferocious intelligence and quick wit and her ability to stand her ground when challenged. At one of her early meetings, when one state principal alleged that Carmel was poaching students, Pauline replied quickly that since 20% of the North Shore population were Catholic, he must in fact be poaching some of hers. Leadership became her, but she would always acknowledge that her success was the result of a team effort, perhaps overlooking the fact that she was one of the team. Her methods of recruitment owed a great deal to her wide networks and were sometimes not strictly in line with Education Gazette processes, but they worked. Lynn, Carolyn and Helen will speak as some of those recruited by Pauline.
Is this the order we have to read to? I was one of the people recruited in an unusual way. Pauline rang me in 1970, knowing that I had recently gone home to have a family, to ask if I would come and do a relieving job for her while she had surgery and her recovery. I had known Pauline at university, and although she was extramural, she did actually come into some lectures, so that's my earliest recollections of her. So I came in 1970 for a term, and then went home again, but a few years later came back and joined the staff. And it wasn't long after that that Pauline came back to Carmel as the principal. She was feisty, she was determined, and as others have commented, she had a wonderful intellect. She was a woman ahead of her times in terms of her philosophy regarding the education of girls. Pauline was a breath of fresh air in those days, when really the rawness of the feminist movement was softening and women were beginning to be more confident and assertive in so many roles. She was prepared to challenge the traditional roles as we looked forward to the days when the motto on her door, which said, "Girls can do anything," was actually true. Another of her sayings was, "Be the boss of yourself, because if you're not, somebody else will." Her arrival was the beginning of a time of change at Carmel. She embraced the big changes of the 70s, the flow-on effects of Vatican II, the feminist movement, and the Integration Act, all of which she embraced and brought to Carmel and brought us to the stage where the school became the school of choice for so many parents on the shore. Pauline encouraged girls to go into new careers, into engineering, into science, to become doctors and not the traditional role of nursing, into the performing and creative arts, into business, to take risks and be an entrepreneur. Pauline saw the potential for good in every girl, when many of us just saw the frustration and the naughtiness, and names have been mentioned tonight which I recall would fall into that category. However, it's been touching for some of us on the staff to see the warmth and the respect that she enjoyed from so many of these girls later in life. Pauline was never afraid to challenge, to encourage, and in so doing she brought out the very best in the girls and in the staff. She was a true mercy woman, and her ability to forgive and not to carry a grudge made her an outstanding principal. That's not to say she was a saint, and many will recall the stamping of those little feet when she was frustrated or displeased. And those of you who were here in the early days and had that tendency to smoke, yes, you caused her to stamp her feet many times when she was aware of the fact that you were down the bottom field smoking. Under Pauline's watch, the school saw the arrival of what I could call a bunch of young, exciting and well-qualified staff. There were the young men like Ian and Andrew and David, and their female counterparts, Chris and Christine, Philippa, Roseanne. Their vitality added much to raising the academic performance of our students. Student involvement in the great social issues of the day, particularly apartheid and equal opportunity, were encouraged by our principal, who never lost the sight of the need for social justice, and there were many memorable assemblies. She knew what she wanted, and she was very astute in the way she handled people, so she usually got what she wanted, be it from the board, or for parents, or even from the Department of Education. A lifetime of involvement in education brought her the respect of teachers, both on the staff at Carmel and in other schools, of principals and educators throughout New Zealand, and she was often the spokesperson on matters of education. Pauline was a great colleague. She loved the social times with the staff. Many a Friday afternoon school gathering saw matters educational, social, political and personal discussed. And it was very easy when you were talking to her in those situations to overlook the fact that she was the boss and she was a nun. For so many of us, she became a lifelong friend. Carmel was Pauline's passion, as others have mentioned. Old girls and their families were always in her thoughts and prayers, and she thrived on news of us all. Pauline was an exceptional principal. We who worked with her or were under her guidance were indeed blessed. Pauline allowed us to fly, and she flew with us. So now rest in peace, Pauline.
I'm going to read a tribute from Mariette Portman, who is unable to be with us tonight. Mariette taught here from 1988 to 2001. Dame Sister Pauline appointed me as the intermediate DRS at Carmel in 1988. She had contacted Chris Frisantia, my previous principal in New Plymouth, and based on his word, I was appointed. Those were the days. Once all the paperwork was completed, I was pleasantly surprised to receive return airfares so that I could come up and meet some key people before the year began. This said a lot about Pauline, who she was. Towards the end of my first year at Carmel, Mr. Richard Scheuer, rest in peace, resigned as intermediate HOD. I remember the teacher next door calling me out onto the deck, suggesting that I should apply. I was horrified at the thought of it, but Pauline had similar ideas, and before long, guess who became the intermediate HOD? As I look back, I am really grateful that Pauline saw leadership potential in me, as this opportunity was the beginning of many years in leadership. 25, which I spent in Mercy colleges. I thank you, Dame Sister Pauline, for your leadership, for your guidance, for your straight talking, for your intellect and your drive. I am privileged to have known you, and I will remember you in my prayers. May you rest in peace. I was very concerned when I visited Sister Pauline at Lady Allen the first time, that her correct title was not on her door. It said Sister Pauline, not Dame Sister Pauline Engel. I did not think this was very just. Pauline was an ardent advocate for justice. Her MA thesis had been on the abolition of capital punishment in New Zealand in 1935 to 1961. Prior to retiring as principal of Carmel, she collaborated with a group of senior students to have her favourite quote from Mika installed above the hall door. Act justly, love tenderly, and walk humbly with your God. Pauline, you certainly acted justly. You loved us, your friends, your family, the students you taught, and those you enrolled, your Sisters of Mercy, and the Carmel community. My personal thanks for being there at the lowest point in my life when my husband died in 1990. You were also there for one of the highlights when my first grandchild was baptised in 2000. You helped me celebrate some significant birthdays along the way with my family and friends. It was your initiative to have the history of Carmel written in 2007 to commemorate the first 50 years of the college. Your amazing memory and in-depth knowledge of the history of the college made this possible. You always believed in the strength and capability of a student. Remember the sign on your door, girls can do anything. How true this has proved to be. Thank you for your friendship, your amazing sense of humour, your commitment to the education of young women, and most of all for being you. It has been a privilege to have been your friend and colleague. Rest in peace, Pauline.
Hi. A sister of the missions who taught me many, many years ago used to say, "Girls, the balance of joy and sorrow is held with an even hand." And this week, it has felt as if the balance was heavily weighed down on sorrow's side. But I did have some real joy on Friday night when I received a phone call from Ireland from Sister Teresa Kilcourse, who was the Director of Religious Studies here at Carmel. I'm not sure when she started, but she was here during the 1980s. She was then known as Sister Teresa Maria. Teresa asked me to say that she is with us in spirit tonight and will be again tomorrow when we celebrate Pauline's Requiem. She is also delighted that Pauline chose that we sing the Galilee song as she is carried from this hall. Sister Teresa introduced the Galilee song to the Leavers' Mass over 30 years ago, and I think she's quite proud that it has become a very well-loved tradition. I'd also like to read you a little quote, and you can guess who maybe you think it applies to. A most charming person, very clever indeed, and never says anything that is not worth hearing, and has plenty to say. In fact, it wasn't written about our Pauline. It was written 176 years ago of Mary Ann Martin, who was the wife of the first judge appointed to New Zealand, but it could very well be written for her. I'd like to give you a quick overview why I'm standing here today. I won't go into details about how I got appointed, but like most of the others, it was pretty unconventional. Never saw an advertisement, never saw the principal, got a second-hand phone call, and I was in. So it was, would I come and do some Latin and a bit of junior RE teaching? So in January, I came round, saw Pauline, got my timetable. There was the Latin, 2 classes of 3rd form RE, 3 classes of 4th form RE, and that was a challenge that nearly ended my very promising career before it actually got started. I was at Carmel for 18 years, and then came retirement, and they're the best years of your life. You can do anything that you've always wanted to do. The government keeps on paying you, and all you've got to do is keep breathing. Pauline's sight was failing, and I realised that reading to her was something that I had time to do. Pauline jumped at the offer. What did we read? Pauline's sister Mari subscribed to the Marist Messenger, Tuimotu, and the London Tablet. After she had finished with them, she would post them to Pauline. Then, when Mari died, Pauline and I were so addicted that she took over the subscriptions. We began meeting once a week, and it was in November 2009. And it soon settled on Tuesday afternoons, and it has continued that way for 8 years. More recently, we became a threesome when Kath Petrie retired from her second job and joined us. There's quite a famous book called Tuesdays with Maury, which made the bestseller list in New York. It's an account of visits made by a journalist to his old professor in his ailing years, where they talked about life. I've often thought about our Tuesdays with Pauline as being somewhat similar, but I never mentioned it to her because I don't think she knew the original book. Rule number 1 when choosing books for Pauline was nothing American. When we read, Pauline was not a passive listener. The word passive could never be applied to her. I'd read, she'd comment, then ask our opinion. That would lead into a discussion, then maybe an anecdote, or maybe the need for further information, which entailed my going home with a topic to research on Google, print it off and take it back next week to read to her. We followed all the Vatican scandals, political issues, social justice issues, and every article about Pope Francis. She had many favourite contributors to the tablet, too many to list. Pauline had a great love of literature from a very early age. She told me of all the books her parents had in their house in Johnsonville, and how her dad used to go to the library in the days when the public service worked on Saturday mornings, and he'd bring the books home for the children. In recent months, Pauline was too frail to go out, so she was again reliant on someone choosing for her. I kept a list in a notebook so that I didn't give her the same book twice, and I estimate that in about the last 12 months, she read or listened to 180 audiobooks. Books meant so much to Pauline, but when she went to live at Lady Ellam, she knew there was no space for her collection, so she calmly sorted them with the help of Anne Wickham, her girl Thursday, who came in and who was Pauline's scribe. Some went to the Carmel College Library and the rest to the hospice shop. Pauline kept 2 books. Obviously, they were very important to her. One of them was an illustrated book of poems about nuns. She delighted in telling me that she had read one of those poems aloud when she was farewelled by the Principals Association. I think you'll enjoy hearing it, and I hope I can do it justice. Before I read it, I would like to say that people have often said to me that I'm so good to have spent my Tuesday afternoons with Pauline, but it was quite the reverse. It was a joy and a privilege to have that time with her. Pauline, you enriched my life so much, and Tuesdays will never be the same. Now the poem. Pauline put an inscription along the top of the poem, and this is what it was. To all my colleagues in the Principals Association who know better than to discount small nuns. The poem's about Sister Stephanie, and Stephanie had 2 things in common with Pauline. She had a pet, but it wasn't that very pampered little pussy that you had over in Carmel College. But Sister Stephanie had a bird, and they were both vertically challenged. So the supermarket proved to be a trial for Sister Stephanie. Oh, rats, she grumbled to herself, the bird seeds on the highest shelf. Unless I gain some extra height, my Charlie won't get fed tonight. The manager, who lingered near, said, having trouble, sister dear. Our shelves are much too high, you say. Well, I see it in a different way. The problem is you're much too small, a tiny speck, a ping-pong ball. A monkey would be bigger than you, and rather better looking too. Sister Stephanie left the store, but came back with a mighty roar. The windows smashed, alarm bells rang, the nuns had formed a bikie gang. The gang was fierce, the gang was mad, the gang was old and leather-clad. With chains and crosses, clubs and spikes, the nuns revved up their superbikes. Then up and down the lanes they sped, with Sister Stephanie up ahead. Yippee, she cried, as piles of tins were scattered just like bowling pins. They crushed the nuts, they blew away the continental food display, they squashed the squash, they split the peas, they toppled all the toiletries. The manager, who'd been so rude, was knocked into the frozen food, and there he lay in cold repose with 2 fish fingers up his nose. The bikies rumbled home to tea, except for Sister Stephanie, who searched the smoking battleground until a pack of seed she found. She paid the manager and smiled. I'm sorry that the girls ran wild, but really you should not poke fun at poor defenceless nuns, my son. Then off she roared upon her Harley, home to feed her vulture, Charlie.
There's much more that could be said. Pauline is the Mosgiel Seminary lecturer who took the student priests to see the then very scandalous film A Clockwork Orange. She's the author of the master's thesis on the abolition of capital punishment, which is still consulted by law students and historians today, and which led to a friendship with the poet James K. Baxter, who allowed her to use the poem A Rope for Harry Fat in her thesis, and gifted her the original copy of the Ballad of the Chelsea Sugar Works. She was equally at ease with ministers of the Crown, university lecturers, bishops, prisoners at Mount Eden and Paramarimal. She is the master wordsmith whose letters, notes and publications are still cherished by many. She was the vicar of education who oversaw the expansion of the Catholic school network in Howick and Manarewa. She also, very spectacularly, is the person who oversaw the cull of the geese who were befouling Carmel surrounds and classrooms. We will continue to tell our stories as we adjourn for a cup of tea, but firstly I'd like to ask Monsignor Bernard, Father Papeta and Father Martin, if they would come forward and bless Pauline's coffin with the water from her beloved Lake Pupuki. And while that is done, I ask you to reflect on the words of the song that Pauline asked to be played, The Deer's Cry.
E te ariki ho tuki aia te oki o kia tonu tanga, a kia pitiki aia te marama tanga mo tonu pore. Te ino tātou, e te ato te kai hanga te kai whakawaro, te hanga whakapono atoa, tūkau ki te wairoa Pauline, me ngā wairoa hoki a puninga tāne o puninga wahine, te murunga mahara katoa, kia whiwhi ai rātou māngai mga pai, ki te rātou hihi tunu ai, te whakakāhoratanga o rātou hara, mātou ariki mai heu karaiti.
I now ask you all to be upstanding as we carry Pauline out of the hall on her way to her Requiem Mass. And we sing the Galilee song.
Thank you.
You are all welcome to join us in the atrium for a cup of tea, and there is good food.